Hey guys, it's Pastor Rod. Let's spend a little bit of time this morning at the end of Acts chapter 28 specifically. This is the story of Paul and his trip to Rome and his side track to the island of Malta. As you may remember, a great storm had come up, and that storm had carried them off course. They ended up being shipwrecked on the island of Malta before Paul was able to complete his trip to Rome. There's a couple of things in that passage. As I was pondering on this morning, I can't tell you the number of people that I've been hearing from lately that say, I feel like God's telling me it's time to take a little break from church. I need to maybe back away from the church for just a little while. I think you need to be careful with those thoughts. Remember what Paul told the people. He said, unless you stay with the boat, you cannot be saved. Paul received a word about how God was going to save everyone on the boat. Specifically Paul, but he'd given Paul everyone's life along with him. Unless you stay with the boat, you cannot be saved. As it turned out, as the boat was being destroyed, crushed against the pounding surf, bits and pieces of it would begin to break off. And it were these bits and pieces that broke off that allowed everyone to reach the shore safely. See, some people couldn't swim and they would have drowned, but by grabbing onto a piece of the damaged, destroyed boat, they could float back into the island. God always has a process, and his process always involves us. So when people say, well, why do you think God wouldn't be saying that? And usually I'm pretty direct with them. That isn't the word of the Lord, because it goes against his written word. His written word says this: forsake not the gathering together of the brothers. And even more as you see that day approach. I don't think you need to be super spiritual to see that that day is approaching. And it's approaching rapidly, and that means that we need each other all the more. We need each other to keep each other safe. See, sometimes I get off on a tangent, and I feel like God is leading me down one path, and everybody else can see that that's not God at all. I need my brothers around me to help me understand what time it is. Those sailors who were going to lower that boat, if Paul hadn't have been there and said, unless you stay with the boat, you're not going to make it, they wouldn't have made it. We need each other. What do you suppose it might have been like on the night that Moses gets the word to put the blood on the doorpost, and you decided not to go to the meeting that evening? You missed the word to put the blood on the doorpost. Now, of course, I'm over-exaggerating things, but you get my point. God has ordained a way to bring us together, and that is through the body, through church. We need to be together. He's called us to be together. Sometimes God does things in ways that we don't expect him to do them, and because of that, we miss him. At the end of Acts chapter 28, verse 11, let me just read that for you. It says, after 3 months, we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with the figurehead of the twin gods Castor and Pollux. I often wonder how many Christians today, Bible-believing, God-fearing Christians today, would not have got on that boat. God's provision for them would have not got on that boat because it had the figureheads of the twin gods. See, oftentimes we need each other to walk through these things in life. And as I see Paul say, no, this is the provision God has for us. Look how he has outfitted everything and made everything ready for us. Then I can begin to see what's happening. We need each other. There's an old story, an old joke, I guess, about a guy who was caught in a flood, and the water had already got up to the front windows on his house, and a boat comes by and says, get on the boat, we'll take you to safety. And he says, no, I've been praying, and the Lord is going to save me. The Lord's going to rescue me. And some more time goes by, and now the water is all the way up to the second story on his house, and another boat comes up to the window and says, sir, get on the boat now. We'll take you to safety. And he says, no, God, I have faith that God is going to save me, and it'll be just as he promised. And some more time goes by, and now the man is out on the roof of his house because the water has already come up to the very top. And a helicopter shows up, and they begin to lower the basket, and he waves them off. No, the Lord has promised to save me. And of course he dies. And he stands before the Lord, and he's a little indignant. Lord, you promised that you would save me, and I was in faith, and I was believing, And the Lord looks at him and says, you know, I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. What more did you want? Of course, we joke about that, but often this is the way it is with God's people. He sets provision for us and makes ways for us, and we don't always clearly discern what's going on. We need each other. We need to stay with the boat. You have to stay with the people that God has called you to. And if you find yourself today a person that God hasn't called you to any church, it's time to find one. It's time to be with God's people. It's an important part of the road that lies ahead. Oftentimes, the National Geographic things, you'll see a lioness begin to cut a gazelle or something out of the herd. Well, they do that because if they can cut them out of the herd, the odds of them taking it down are much greater. If the smaller animal stays with the herd can keep the smaller animal safe. It's important, friends, that you stick with the boat. It's an important thing. And I encourage you, if you haven't found a boat yet, today's the day. It's time to find a group of believers that you can walk with and hear the word of the Lord with and get direction together with. This is how the kingdom works. I hope you find that encouraging today. I hope that you will continue in the blessing that the Lord has for us because He has called us to be overcomers in this hour. Friends, have a great week.